The buzzards found him first. They came in slow circles against a sky gone copper at the edges, patient the way only carrion birds are patient. For a long while, nothing on the ground moved to prove them wrong. Emmett Sawyer lay face down in the red dust of the Starr County flats, one arm flung wide. His shirt had gone black across the ribs, blood dried hours ago and started again with every shallow breath. His hat sat crown down 10 feet off, filling slowly with sand. His horse was gone. His rifle was gone. The only thing left on him that mattered was the tin star pinned crooked to his vest. Even that had turned the color of rust. He was not dead. Not yet. That was the whole of the question the desert had left open. It would not stay open long. The ground told the rest of it, to anyone who knew how to read ground. 6 horses, maybe 7, had circled this stretch of flat, then pulled off north in a hurry, not south, toward any town a man might report to. No wagon tracks, no bodies but his. Whoever had left Sawyer here had not meant for him to be found. They had meant for the buzzards to finish the paperwork. 2 miles off, past a low rise of mesquite, the flag over Fort Ringgold hung dead still in the heat. Close enough to see, too far to matter to a man who could not stand. The boy came down off the ridge on bare feet. He moved the way something small moves when it has learned that being seen is the same as being hunted. He stopped twice, once at the tree line, once at the lip of the wash, and both times he nearly turned back. His people had buried enough of their own in ground like this to owe nothing to a man wearing that badge. Every lesson he had ever been taught said to leave the ranger for the birds and walk the other direction, fast, not look back until the river stood between them. He did not walk the other direction. Chappo was 10 years old. He had already learned more than once in his short life what a man's uniform was worth against what that man had actually done. Trust, for him, was a debt collected in blood more often than it was repaid. And yet, here he was again, kneeling in the dirt beside the very kind of man his mother had taught him to fear, working the stopper loose on the only canteen he owned. Perhaps that hesitation is not so foreign. Most people have stood once at the edge of a wash of their own, a hand held out by someone they had every reason to distrust, and they've had to decide, in the space of a single breath, whether the mercy in front of them was a trick or the last door left open. Chappo decided the way the desert had taught him to decide everything, slowly, his whole body ready to run. He tipped the canteen against Sawyer's cracked lips. Water spilled more than it poured, down the chin into the dust, but some of it found its way where it was meant to go. The ranger's throat moved once, swallowing on reflex long before his eyes had any right to open. They did not open. Not yet. Chappo worked without speaking. It was how he did everything that mattered, quiet, exact, already so much older than his hands. He rolled the man half onto his side so the wound could breathe instead of drown, and for the first time saw the face that went with the badge. Sun cracked at the eyes, gray already climbing into the stubble at the jaw. A thin white scar cut through one eyebrow like a line drawn and never finished. Not a young man's face, not a stranger's either, though Chappo could not yet say why that second thought had come to him at all, or why it refused to leave once it had. He pressed 2 fingers under the jaw and counted a pulse that stumbled more than it walked. He was young and alone, and the only law within a day's ride was the one bleeding out under his hands. but there was a steadiness in him that owed nothing to age. It came from somewhere older than 10 years. It came from having already lost more than most grown men ever will, and from knowing the hard way exactly what was still his to protect. The desert did not make this easy. Heat still climbed off the flats even as the light went long and gold, and the smell of blood had drawn more than birds. Somewhere behind him, faint, a coyote called and was answered. Chappo did not look up. He had maybe an hour before dark handed the flats over to something worse than curiosity. He tore a strip from his own shirt hem and packed it against the wound, pressing until the cloth went from red to merely damp. His palms shook with the effort of holding still, when every instinct in him wanted to run for the wash and not stop until the water covered his tracks. Sawyer's breath caught and dragged, a rhythm too uneven to trust. Once his eyelids fluttered, not waking, just a flinch against pain too deep to reach. Chappo went rigid, waiting to be seen, to be recognized as exactly what he was. The eyes did not open. The moment passed. He kept working. A sound reached him then, thin and far off, gone almost before it registered. Hooves, maybe, or only wind combing through the mesquite. Chappo lifted his head and held it there, counting his own heartbeat against the silence that followed. Nothing came. He told himself it was nothing, and did not quite believe it. He went back to the wound, ears still turned toward the ridge. He reached for the gun belt, meaning only to check for a second wound hidden beneath it. His hand stopped instead on a canteen already hanging there. Sawyer's own, tin, dented deep on one side in the shape of a thumb pressed hard into soft metal a long time ago. Chappo went still. He knew that dent. His fingers found the shape of it before his mind allowed the thought all the way through, the exact curve, the exact place a grown man's thumb had worn a hollow into the metal, carrying it the same way, on the same hip, for years. He had held this canteen before, not one like it. This one. Above him, the buzzards tightened their circle, unhurried, certain of their patience. Below him, a dying man breathed once, then again, not knowing yet that the boy kneeling over him had gone rigid with a memory 2 years old, staring at a piece of dented tin as if it might still be capable of speaking his name. 2 years collapsed into the space of one held breath. He had been 8 then, not 10, small enough that Dade's men had nearly walked past him in the smoke behind the burned lodges. By the time the captain doubled back for him, there was no one left standing to argue otherwise. No one but the ranger. Sawyer had broken rank without raising his voice. That was the part Chappo remembered clearest, not the shouting, not the smoke. How quiet the man had been, walking into it, as if quiet itself were a kind of weapon. He did not remember the words Sawyer used on Dade. He remembered the canteen, warm still from another man's hip, pressed into his own 2 hands. He remembered 4 words, flat as a slap. Run, don't look back. He remembered Dade's face going the gray-red of old meat, and the order that came out of him next, aimed at anyone standing close enough to obey it. No one had. Sawyer turned his back on the whole burning morning and walked the boy to the tree line himself, one hand heavy on a shoulder that did not yet reach his hip. The smoke had smelled of hide and cedar and something worse underneath. Chappo did not let himself smell it again now. Some doors, once shut, earned the right to stay shut. Chappo had run until the sun changed color twice. He had not looked back, not once, in 2 years. He was looking now. The desert did not wait for memory to finish its business. Somewhere under his palm, Sawyer's chest rose, fell, caught, a rhythm too thin to trust for long. The dent in the tin was still there under Chappo's thumb, worn smooth as a coin from years of the same grip, the same hip, the same man. He had carried it every day since that morning, had learned to hate it and keep it in the same breath. Now, the man who had given it to him lay bleeding into red dirt, and the debt had walked back out of the smoke to collect itself. He pressed 2 fingers beneath the jaw again, the way he had out on the flats, and found the pulse thinner than before, stumbling, then catching, then stumbling again. A man could not stay half a ghost forever. He would tip one way or the other before the light did. Chappo made his choice the way his people made most choices in country like this, with his hands first and his heart following after, out of breath. He got his shoulder under Sawyer's arm and pulled. The ranger was dead weight, heavier than any grown man had a right to be. The ground gave nothing back for the effort. Sand shifting under boot heels that were not his own, catching, sliding. Chappo's bare feet found better purchase, dug in, found it again. A stand of prickly pear caught his ankle once, and he did not stop to feel it. The sting would still be there after, waiting its turn, 20 feet to the lip of the wash. It felt longer than the whole run from the ridge. Sweat cut lines through the dust on his face, and he did not stop to wipe it. Sawyer's boots dragged 2 furrows behind them, shallow and then deeper, a record the wind would erase by morning if the buzzards did not do it first. The bank gave way once, a slide of loose gravel taking both of them down half a length faster than Chappo meant to go. For a moment, he thought he had lost his grip entirely, thought he heard something in Sawyer's chest shift wrong, a catch that was not breath. He froze, palm flat over the wound, waiting for the sound to come again. It did not come. He let the air back into his own lungs and kept moving. The wash was dry, cut deep enough to throw shade, walled on both sides by red clay that still held the day's heat like a stove going cold. Chappo eased the ranger down against the low bank and went to work with the same economy he brought to everything that mattered. No wasted motion, no words spent on a man who could not hear them. He tore what was left of his shirtum into a second strip and packed it hard against the wound, holding until his own arm shook. The cloth went from red to merely damp. He allowed himself that much as a measure of progress. Above the wash, the light had started its long fall toward evening, gold thinning into rust. The heat eased off the flats by degrees too small to trust. A hawk turned once against the copper sky and did not come down. The desert kept its distance the way it always did, offering nothing, taking nothing back, indifferent to which of the 2 lives in the wash would still be a life by morning. Flies had found the blood before the light finished falling. Chappo waved them off without looking, the motion automatic, older than the wound itself. Out past the lip of the wash, dusk was gathering itself in the low places first, the way it always did on the flats, pooling in the draws, climbing the ridges last. Sawyer's eyelids moved, not opening, only a tremor, a flinch against some pain too deep for the rest of him to reach. His lips parted on a breath that almost became a word. It did not. Chappo leaned close enough to catch it if it came again, but nothing came. He settled back on his heels, one hand still on the wound, and waited the way he had learned to wait for everything. Without complaint, without hope spent too early. He thought of the 4 words again. Run. Don't look back. He had obeyed them for 2 years, and here he was anyway, kneeling in the one place obedience should have kept him from ever finding. That was when the sound reached him, faint, then less faint, carried low along the flats the way sound traveled before dark, when the ground itself seemed to lean in and listen. Hooves, more than one horse, not moving away. Chappo went still over the wound, every muscle locked into the same stillness that had kept him alive at the tree line 2 years before. The sound did not fade the way distant riders fade. It held its pitch, climbed a little, then bent, a long, unhurried arc across the flats, the kind of turn made by men who were not lost and were not leaving. They were circling back to finish what the desert had been too slow to do. The riders did not come down into the wash. They held the ridge instead, a black line strung across the last of the light, waiting the patient way men wait when they already believe they know where a thing went to die. Chappo counted 6 shapes against the copper sky. The ground earlier had told him 7. He did not chase the difference now. Only the shapes mattered. The shapes did not move. He dragged Sawyer back another 6 feet, deeper into the fold the bank offered, and pressed a hand flat over the man's mouth before he understood why. Before the breath under his palm caught, dragged, and nearly broke into sound. It stayed a breath, nothing more. Chappo held his hand there until every shape on the ridge had turned one after another and ridden north into what remained of the day. He counted to 100 in his own tongue before he let his hand fall. His people counted that way when the counting itself was the only thing keeping a body still. Dark came down fast once it started, no long dusk to ease into it, just day then not day, the sky changing its mind all at once. Cold followed close behind. It always did, out here, no matter how the day had burned. Chappo had known that since before he could walk far enough to prove it wrong. He built no fire. A fire was a confession. Instead, he worked the last dry brush he could reach into a low windbreak against the bank and lay against Sawyer's good side the way he might have lain against a rock still warm from noon. Not for comfort, though there was some in it, but because 2 bodies lost the cold slower than one. Sawyer's breath rattled thin against his ear, catching every 4th or 5th pull, a wagon wheel finding the same rut again and again. Chappo listened to every one of them. He had learned since the fire 2 years gone that the moment a person stopped listening was usually the moment worth listening hardest for. Past midnight, the fever announced itself. Heat, where before there had only been the cool of blood loss, sweat springing along a hairline gone damp. Sawyer's head turned once against the packed earth. A sound came out of him, not quite a word, thin and cracked at the edges, gone before it could become anything. Chappo did not try to make it into more than it was. Some sounds were only pain finding the shortest way out. He unwound the strip at Sawyer's ribs and checked it by feel. Damp, not fresh red. He wound it tighter. His hands did not shake this time. Hours of the same motion had taught them not to ask his mind for help. "Still here," he said, so quiet it barely disturbed the air between them. He did not know if the words were for Sawyer or for himself. He said them anyway and went back to listening. The night wore on the way nights did in that country, long and honest about it, offering no shortcut through the hours a person owed. Coyotes worked the far ridge, then went quiet. Once something moved close in the brush and stopped its breath entirely. 10 counted heartbeats before it resolved into only wind in a stand of dead ocotillo. He did not sleep. He had not expected to. By the time the sky grayed at its lowest edge, Sawyer's fever had settled into something that was not better and was not worse. A held note, the body arguing with itself, no verdict yet. Chappo checked the canteen. Water for one more day if he was careful. Nothing to eat. A wound that would need more than a torn shirt hem before long. He made the only choice the morning offered. The ambush site lay less than a mile back. He had marked it without meaning to. The low mesquite flat where the birds first found Sawyer. Nothing gentle waited in going back to it. There might be water left in a fallen canteen. Food in a saddlebag some rider hadn't troubled to strip clean. There might be nothing at all. 2 empty stomachs and a wound with no cloth left were the greater risk. Chappo decided and went. He left Sawyer wedged into the deepest shade the bank offered, canteen within reach of a hand too weak to lift it, and walked back the way the buzzards had first shown him. The flat looked worse by gray morning light than it had by dying gold. Smaller, too. Chappo read it the way his mother once read a season's first snow, not as a picture, but as a story already finished, waiting only to be told. Drag marks, where Sawyer's body had been moved or had crawled. 2 spent cartridge casings, brass gone dull with dust. Half buried where a rifle had been worked fast and dropped fast after. No horse tracks close in. The shooters had fired from the rise and never come down to be sure of their work. That told him something about the kind of men they were. He could not yet say what. No fallen canteen, no saddlebag. Whatever this had been, it had not been robbery. He was turning to go, empty-handed, already rationing his disappointment, when a low mesquite snagged his shirtum and would not let go easy. He crouched to free it. Something else was caught in the same low branch, small, round, dulled with a night of dust, too regular in its shape to be a stone or a seed pod. He worked it loose with 2 fingers, a button, brass, heavy for its size, an eagle stamped into its face, worn smooth at the high points the way only long wear smooth metal. Chappo turned it once in his palm. He had seen buttons like it before, on the coats of men who rode out of forts, not out of the brush outlaws called home, men who answered to a name posted somewhere, who drew pay from somebody's ledger. Whoever had left Sawyer here to die had not been wearing the clothes of a bandit at all. Chappo did not understand yet what that meant, not the whole shape of it, only that it sat wrong in his hand, heavier than brass had any right to be, the way a stone sits wrong when you already suspect what it's been used to hold down. He closed his fist around it and did not open his palm again the whole walk back to the wash, as if daylight, too soon, might undo whatever truth it was still deciding to tell him. Chappo walked back into the wash with his fist still closed. He did not open it. Even then, he knelt beside Sawyer, checked the breath first. Thin, but there. And only after that, let the button roll into his palm and studied it again in the gray light. An eagle, worn smooth at the wingtips. He had no word yet for what it meant. He only knew, the way he knew weather before it arrived, that it meant something, and that carrying it back to the fort mattered more than carrying it anywhere else. He made his decision the way he made all of them. With his hands, no help was coming. Not for a ranger the department had already half forgotten. Bleeding is far off the road. Waiting in the wash meant the water would run out first, the fever second. There was only moving, a little each day toward the flag he had seen from the ridge. He built a drag from mesquite branches and his own torn blanket, lashed with the leather off Sawyer's gun belt. Within the first hour, he knew how little that would spare his shoulders. Uphill, he pulled. Downhill, he held the weight back with his whole body so the drag would not run him over. He rested when Sawyer's breath went ragged, not when his own arms asked for it. His arms had stopped giving orders somewhere on the first morning. The days did not separate cleanly after that. They folded into each other the way pain does. One long stretch, broken only by dark and light. Chappo rationed water by mouthfuls, 3 for the man, 1 for himself, and he told himself the math made sense even when his own throat argued otherwise. He found a seep once, brackish and slow, and coaxed it from a crack in gray stone until his fingers went raw with the digging. He ate what the desert gave without being asked. A rabbit taken quick and quiet. Prickly pear scraped clean by feel, in the dark, so no fire would give them away. He moved at dawn and dusk, when the light was thin enough to hide a shape moving low across it. Through the worst of midday, he lay flat, Sawyer's head in the only shade he could build, and waited out the hours the sun owned outright. Twice he heard riders, far off, unhurried, the same patient arc he had watched from the wash. Both times he went still as stone until the sound thinned back into wind. He had learned that stillness a long time before this. It had kept him alive once already. The fever came back on the second night and did not leave again. It climbed in him like heat off summer rock, dried his lips to paper, turned his sleep, what little of it Chappo let him have, into something closer to drowning. He thrashed once, hard enough that Chappo had to lie half across him just to keep the wound from tearing open again. Words came with the thrashing, not sentences, pieces. "Won't believe me without it?" Chappo held the wet cloth to his mouth and said nothing. The words meant nothing to him yet. He filed them anyway, the way he filed hoof prints, broken brush. Enough pieces, he trusted, would become a story, even if no single piece told it. The third night gave him more. Dade. Said flat, said twice, the second time through teeth clenched hard enough to creak. Then, long minutes later, thinner. The proof has to reach the colonel. Before he does! A silence Chappo could have mistaken for peace if he had not already learned better. Then, barely a breath. Before he buries it with me? Chappo sat very still over him. He turned the button over between 2 fingers, the way he had turned it every night since the mesquite gave it up. An eagle. Federal brass, not outlaw leather. Men who answered to a name posted somewhere, who drew pay from somebody's ledger, his own thought from the flat, come back around now to mean something sharper. He set it beside the fragments Sawyer's fever kept dropping, like a man emptying his pockets before a river crossing. Dade, the proof, the colonel, before he buries it with me. The shape of it arrived the way weather arrives, not sudden, all at once. Once it was close enough to feel. This had not been outlaws hunting a lone ranger for his horse and his rifle. This had been a name Sawyer meant to carry to a colonel and a button from a coat that did not belong on any outlaw. 6 or 7 riders who circled instead of finishing the job themselves, patient the way men are patient when someone else has already been sent to do the dying for them. Someone inside that same uniform had wanted Sawyer erased before his name ever reached the fort. Dade. The name did not mean a face to Chappo yet. It did not need to. It only needed to be true. And something in him, the same something that had known the dent in the canteen before his mind caught up, believed it already. He did not sleep that night either. By the 4th day, the wound had gone the color of old meat at its edges. Sawyer's breathing had thinned to something Chappo measured in the space between each pull, not the pulls themselves. The drag had worn a groove through 2 pairs of moccasins, and his shoulders had stopped complaining days ago. They had simply gone numb and stayed that way, which was not, he understood now, the same thing as healed. The flag stood closer with each dusk. Not close. Closer. That night, checking the binding at the ribs by feel in the dark, Chappo felt a hand close hard around his wrist. Not the loose grip of fever this time. Sawyer's eyes had opened, barely, only halfway, but open and fixed on him with a clarity that had not been there in 3 days. Boy. The voice came out cracked, but steady under the crack. Listen to me. Chappo went still, wrist caught, waiting. Don't let them bury this with me. He did not let go of Chappo's wrist. Chappo let him hold it. Some things a man could only say with his hand full of something solid. And Sawyer, it seemed, needed the weight of a small wrist under his fingers more than he needed the words to come out right. 2 years, he said. His voice found its footing the way a wagon wheel finds a rut and settles. 2 years telling myself I did what any man would have done out there. That's a lie I got tired of hauling around somewhere past the first winter. Chappo said nothing. Silence pulled more truth out of a man than questions ever had. Dade's order was plain. Every soul in that camp, women, the old ones, the children, same as the rifles. Sawyer's grip tightened, then let go by degrees, like a man riding out a wave he could not stop. I looked down that line, and there was a boy standing where no boy should have had to stand, and I wasn't thinking about the badge, wasn't thinking about the colonel, or what it cost me to say no to a captain in front of his own men. He stopped, started again, lower. I was thinking about my own son. Buried him in Waco before he was old enough to walk. Fever took him in a week. I couldn't watch it happen twice in one lifetime. Wouldn't. Somewhere behind his eyes a fire burned that had never once been lit out loud. So I gave you the canteen and told you to run. And I told myself that was the end of the debt. Man could sleep after that. He shook his head against the packed earth, slow. It wasn't the end of anything. I made you into something 2 peoples hate for opposite reasons. Too touched by a ranger's mercy for your own to trust you all the way home. Too Indian for that fort to ever look at you twice, whatever you carry through the gate. I did that to you, not Dade, me. And I never once came looking to see what it cost. You looked for me once, Chappo said. At the tree line, you carried me there yourself. Once. Sawyer's mouth pulled into something that was not quite a smile. A man doesn't get credit twice for the same good morning. The wind shifted through the wash, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Sawyer's breath caught wrong on the next pull, a hitch too sharp, too sudden, and his hand went rigid around Chappo's wrist before it eased again. Chappo laid 2 fingers flat against the binding at the ribs. Damp, not fresh. He let his own breath out slow, the way he had learned to let out everything that scared him before it showed on his face. "You are still breathing," Chappo said finally. "That is not a debt I collect with talk." He looked past the low bank toward the flag. 4 days of dragging a man twice his weight had bought them less ground than the flag deserved. Close enough now to make out the shape of it against the pale morning, too far still for a man who could no longer walk to reach it before the fever finished what the bullet had started. The drag would not get them there in time. He had known that for 2 nights and had not let himself think it all the way through until now. "I go alone," he said. Sawyer's eyes came fully open at that, clear in a way they had not been since the second night. "No, you cannot walk. I cannot carry you and outrun a patrol at the same time." Chappo said it plainly, the way his mother had once explained why the river could not be argued with, only crossed at the right place. "Alone, I move fast, small, low to the ground. 6 riders looking for a wounded ranger will not look twice at a boy in the brush. They'll look twice at Dade's word against yours before you're through the gate. Then I will still be through the gate." Chappo's jaw set the way it had at the tree line 2 years and 1 lifetime ago. "I am the only one who can cross what is between here and there without being seen. You taught me that yourself." "Without meaning to." Sawyer held his eyes a long moment, searching for the argument that would change the boy's mind, and did not find one. There was none to find. He had asked once for someone to believe a truth the whole world had reason to doubt, and the only one left standing to carry it was 10 years old and had already survived worse roads than this one. "The button," Sawyer said. "The badge. Both of them on you, not left behind." "Both," Chappo said. He had not needed telling. He gathered what little the wash still had to give, checked the binding one last time, packed dry brush close enough to break the wind without smoke to mark it, set what remained of the prickly pear within reach of a hand still strong enough to feed itself, barely. Then he reached for the canteen at his own hip, the dented one, the one that had started this whole reckoning back on the flats. He set it in Sawyer's hand and closed the man's fingers around it himself. "Keep drinking," Chappo said. "Keep breathing." Sawyer looked at the tin a long moment, at the thumb-shaped hollow worn into it by 2 hands now instead of 1, and said nothing that needed saying. He nodded. That was enough. Chappo stood. His legs argued with him after 4 days of drag work and no real sleep, and he let them argue and did not listen. There would be time to feel the cost of this later, if there was a later to feel it in. He checked the brass button and the crooked tin star, both wrapped tight in a fold of shirtum and knotted against his chest where no branch could snag them loose again. He looked once more toward the flag, hanging dead still over Fort Ringgold in the flat morning light, farther away than any 10-year-old should have had to measure a life against. Then he started walking. He did not stop until his legs stopped answering him, and even then, he only slowed. The flats gave way by degrees to harder ground, caliche and low creosote. The sun climbed with him the whole first stretch, merciless. It flattened his shadow to nothing under his own feet. He kept the flag on his left, never straight at it, always just enough to the side that a patrol scanning the open ground would find only brush where a boy had been a breath before. Twice he heard them before he saw them. The first time was hoofbeats on hardpan, unhurried, the same patient rhythm the 6 riders had worn on the ridge above the wash. Chappo went flat behind a low stand of prickly pear and did not breathe until the sound thinned into wind. The second time was voices. 2 men, close enough that he caught the shape of laughter without the words. He lay in a dry cut for the better part of an hour, cheek pressed to hot stone. The badge and the button dug their edges into his chest through the knotted shirt hem. He waited until the voices moved off north and did not come back. He drank the last of the water somewhere past midday. There had not been much left to drink. The fort's outer buildings rose out of the shimmer by degrees, adobe walls the color of the ground they stood on, a scatter of soldiers' quarters, a corral holding more horses than he had ever seen gathered in one place. His feet had gone past pain by then into something duller, a distance from his own body that felt distantly like a warning. He did not slow for it. Sawyer's breath was somewhere behind him, thinner with every hour spent crossing this ground instead of tending it. There was no cost too high yet to pay for speed. The gate stood open, flanked by a low rail fence and a soldier in blue who straightened the moment he saw what was coming toward him out of the heat. A boy, alone, Apache by the look of him, filthy past telling. He moved like something that had been walking for days and had stopped noticing. Hold up. The rifle came off the soldier's shoulder before the words finished leaving his mouth. Not aimed yet. Only ready. That's far enough. Chappo stopped where the man's voice put him. His chest heaved. He had not let himself feel how hard until he had to stand still and do nothing else. "Ranger," he said. His English came out cracked, worn thin by 4 days of silence and one of shouting nothing at all. "Ranger Sawyer, dying, in the wash, 2 hours' walk." "You steal that name off a wanted board boy, or you know it because you left a man out there yourself?" The soldier did not lower the rifle. His eyes went past Chappo to the empty flats behind him. No horse, no wagon, no grown man walking beside him to make the story easier to believe. "Where's your people? Where's your horse?" "No horse, no people here." Chappo's hands went to the knot at his chest, slow, so the motion would not read as anything but what it was. "I have proof. I need the major. Bill, you need to step back from that gate is what you need." A second soldier had come up beside the first by then, and a third behind him. Nothing drew them but the shape of trouble at the fence line. None of them lowered anything. None of them reached for him either. They only stood, a wall of blue and doubt, exactly the wall Sawyer had promised him would be waiting. That was when the voice came from behind them, easy and unhurried. "Let him through." The soldiers parted like water before the man stepping out from the shade of the gatehouse. An officer, tall, uniform pressed clean, in a way nothing on the flats ever stayed clean. A smile already fixed and waiting before he had even seen what it was for. 6 soldiers had moved without him raising his voice once. Chappo understood before the man spoke again that he would not need to raise it a second time either. Something in Chappo went cold, before his mind had finished catching up to why. He had not seen this face in 2 years. He had heard it in memory more times than he could count. Flat, giving an order over burning lodges, over a line of people kneeling in smoke. He had never once let himself picture what stood above that voice. Now, the face arrived to fill the space memory had left empty. It fit the voice exactly. "Well, now," the officer crouched, unhurried, bringing himself down to a child's eye level with the easy grace of a man used to being believed. "Long way from anywhere for a boy your size. What's your business at my gate?" Chappo said nothing. His hand found the knot at his chest and did not open it. "He's asking for the major, Captain," the first soldier said. "Says there's a ranger dying out past the flats." Something moved behind the officer's eyes, brief, gone almost before it surfaced, the way a fish turns once beneath still water and leaves no mark a man could swear to after. The smile did not change at all. "Did he?" The captain's voice stayed warm, stayed slow, a man discussing weather. "That's a serious thing to bring to a gate, son. Best you tell it to me first, quiet, before you go troubling the major with a story that might not hold together in front of him. Come on now, walk with me a ways. Nothing to fear." He held out a hand, clean-nailed, steady, the kind of hand a frightened child was supposed to take without a second thought. Chappo did not move his feet. He had learned, across 4 days of dragging a dying man through a country that offered nothing back for free, exactly what a hand held out could cost a person who trusted it too fast. "Come now." The hand did not waver. Neither did the smile. "It's a long walk to nowhere else from here." 2 years of silence had taught Chappo how to disappear inside stillness. It had not taught him until this exact moment, standing in the shadow of the one uniform that had ever truly frightened him, what he would do the day silence stopped being enough. The captain's fingers closed the last of the distance and found his wrist. Chappo tore free, staggered back a full step, and screamed the only name that mattered louder than any name had ever left his throat before. "Major Bell!" His fist came up with it, the shirt hem knot torn open in the same motion, the crooked tin star and the eagle-stamped button raised bright and bare above his head for every soldier at that gate to see. And he did not lower his arm, and he did not step back again, and he did not let go. Major Osric Bell did not hurry. Command had never once asked him to raise his voice to be obeyed. He crossed the yard through a quiet that comes only after a scream. Soldiers still hadn't decided whether to lower their rifles. He stopped an arm's length from Dade's outstretched hand, close enough that the captain had to choose in front of every man at that gate between reaching for a child and stepping back for his superior. He stepped back. Bell's eyes went to the boy's raised fist, to the tin star, worn pale at the points, to the brass eagle beside it, small and entirely wrong in a 10-year-old's palm. "That star belongs to Ranger Emmett Sawyer." Bell didn't need to look twice to be sure. "I've watched it ride on his hip at this fort more mornings than I can count. Where is he?" "Wash, west, past the flats. 2 hours, maybe less." Chappo's arm did not come down. "Dying, not dead. He's sunstruck, Major, and likely coached." Dade's smile had gone thin at the edges. A coat let out one size too small. Some drifter's boy, sent ahead by whoever ran a ranger off the road to begin with. "I'd sooner mount a rescue on a solid report than—" "I did not ask you." Bell still had not raised his voice. "I asked the boy." So Chappo told it, plain, the way his mother had taught him, lay a fact on a table where a man could weigh it himself. The ambush, the wash, 4 days of water rationed by mouthfuls. He did not soften the parts that made Dade's face go the color of old meat. He held up the button last, turning it so the eagle caught the light. Sawyer said your name in the fever, twice. Said the proof had to reach the colonel before you buried it with him. He did not look away from Dade once, all the while. This came off the ground where the 6 riders left him for dead, not outlaw leather, army brass. A sergeant near the rail took the button from Chappo's open palm, unasked, turned it once under the light, looked up at Bell instead of Dade. Federal issue, sir, officer's coat, not a private's. Something moved through Dade's face then. Quick, the fish turning once beneath still water. This time it did not vanish before it left a mark. This is, his voice climbed half a step before he caught it. This proves nothing. A button, a child's fever story told secondhand by a dying man who has never once in 11 years under my command been caught lying to save his own skin. Bell's tone had not changed at all. That was worse for Dade than shouting would have been. You, Captain, have been under my command for 3. Dade opened his mouth again and found nothing in it worth saying. His hand, still faintly extended toward where the boy had stood, closed slowly into a fist at his side. Not a threat, only a man discovering he had nowhere left to put it. He did not run. He did not reach for the pistol on his hip. He only stood very still while 2 soldiers, at a nod from Bell, came and took his arms. He let them. The way a man lets go of a rope he has already understood he cannot hold. Bell was already turning away from him before the soldiers finished closing the distance. Sergeant, horses, 6 men, water for 2. The boy rides at the front. He's the only one among us who knows the ground. He looked down at Chappo. Something in the flat command softened just at the edges into something closer to respect. Can you find that wash again in the dark if it comes to that? I found it in the light with a dying man on my back, Chappo said. I can find it blind. They rode hard. The desert that had taken 4 days to cross on foot gave itself up in under 2 hours to men who knew the country. Chappo rode behind the sergeant, calling the turns by memory. The dead Ocotillo stand, the low mesquite flat, the wash cut deep enough to throw shade. They found Sawyer where Chappo had left him, canteen loose in one hand. His breath was so shallow, the first soldier down off his horse thought, for one long second, they had ridden 2 hours to bury a man instead of save one. Then the ranger's eyes opened, found the boy's face above him, and held there. Told you, Sawyer said, voice barely more than the shape of words, not to let them bury it with me. I did not, Chappo said. I brought it back instead. Fort Ringgold gave Emmett Sawyer his badge back in front of the whole post 3 days later. The fever had broken. The wound had stopped arguing with him. Bell pinned it to his shirt himself. In the same yard where a soldier had once leveled a rifle at a boy for asking to be believed. Dade rode out under guard that same afternoon, stripped of rank. He said nothing to anyone who had already stopped listening. Nobody at the fort watched him go for long. There are men whose leaving is worth less of a crowd's time than their arriving ever was. That evening, the sky went the color of a banked fire over the Rio Grande. Sawyer sat on the porch of the officers' quarters, ribs still bound, boots off, for the first time in a week. Chappo sat beside him on the step, close enough that their shoulders touched. Sawyer held out the canteen, dented still, strap re-stitched by someone's careful hand, the same thumb-shaped hollow worn into its side by 2 grips now instead of 1. Chappo drank first, then passed it back. A mercy once given does not stay where it was left. It goes wherever the one who needed it goes. It waits there, patient as an unwritten debt, for the day it can walk back through the door on its own 2 feet. 2 years ago, a ranger pressed a canteen into a frightened boy's hands and told him to run. Tonight, the same tin passed between them on a porch neither had been sure he would live to sit on. "You could have stayed at the wash," Sawyer said. "Let the soldiers find us both once they came looking." "You would not have lasted that long." "No," Sawyer admitted, "I wouldn't have." He looked out at the river. The last of the light was breaking apart on the water. Ever wonder if it would have been easier back at the tree line to just look away? Man could have told himself somebody else would step in. Somebody usually doesn't. Chappo thought about it the way he thought about everything that mattered. Slowly, turning it over before he let it go. "I have wondered if I would have stopped to help you if you had been anyone else." He watched the water too. "I think I would have. I think that is why you stopped for me." Neither of them had an answer better than the water going dark in front of them, so they let it sit there, unclaimed, the way the best truths usually are. Somewhere behind them, the fort settled into its evening sounds. A gate closing, a bugle folding the day away. If you have ever owed a debt you could not repay in money, you already know this quiet, the particular quiet of finally setting it down. It does not feel like winning. It feels like breathing all the way out for the first time in longer than you knew. The canteen passed between them once more before the light went. Neither one let go of it for long.